know worldwide that we are breaking natural economic laws by concentrating a vast amount of the wealth into the hands of a few. Look at a flock of birds. They are all roughly the same size, none too skinny, none too fat. However, when I look at my beloved France, I see billionaires and beggars. I see those whose grandchildren's grandchildren will still have millions of euros in capital without having worked for any of it, and I see those who great-grandkids will be stuck in the same low socioeconomic class no matter how hard they labor. Did you know that in France, it takes 6 generations to approach the national average income of over 34,000 euros? In Denmark, it only takes 2 generations to approach the national income.
2 questions. Why is there so much inequality within France, and what can be done about it?
The state has to intervene because we are so far out of balance. Laissez-faire only works when there's balance. When R, the return on capital, is greater than G, the rate of economic growth, you get the great economic and social inequality we are witnessing right now. Even if France experiences economic growth, the public's purchasing power won't increase unless it keeps up with the richest capital. Why are we called socialists when economically we behave more like plutocracy? This will remain this way unless a very progressive and universal tax is introduced across all Eurozone countries.
What is a progressive tax, and why must it be introduced across all Eurozone countries?
With a progressive tax, the more you make, the more you pay. In Europe, many countries seem to be progressive on the surface, but in actuality, the wealth pay far less percentage of their income than the upper middle class. Without the tax being universal, it would be almost impossible to introduce a truly progressive tax since the wealthy can simply move to a Eurozone country that is friendlier. Our current tax system does not generate the revenue needed to fight social inequality. We don't need French brain drain.
Thank you, Mr. Piketty. I'll have to have you back to discuss R greater than G sometime. Our next guest, Priscilla Ludowski, who is the founder of the Yellow Vest movement. Her online petition has gained over 2 million signatures. Ms. Ludowski, why did the protesters choose the name Yellow Vests?
Well, you know, during the French Revolution, we were called sans-culottes without breeches. The bourgeoisie wore silk. The yellow vests signify a call to arms. Its bright neon color draws attention and are very inexpensive to purchase. Hopefully something is done before the streets run red. As it's his Bastille Day, I will be reading an excerpt by revolutionary Jean-Paul Marat. Don't be deceived when they tell you things are better now, even if there's no poverty to be seen, because the poverty's been hidden. Even if you ever got more wages and could afford to buy more of these new and useless goods which industries foist on you, and even if it seems that you never had so much, that is the only slogan of those who have much more than you. Don't be taken in when they paternally pat you on the shoulder and say that there's no inequality worth speaking of, and no more reason to fight. Because if you believe them, they will completely charge in their marble homes and granite banks.
What do you mean by streets run red? Are you advocating a bloody revolution?
By streets run red, I mean communism. Capitalism does not work for many of us, and some want to try anything else. Communism has failed almost anywhere it has been tried. Macron's government fears being called socialist so much that they are afraid to try solutions.
Do you think President Macron should raise taxes to redistribute France's wealth?
Lower my taxes. The rich should pay their fair share. They avoid doing so through both legal and illegal means. Tax evasion is a huge problem Macron dare not to talk about because he needs the bourgeoisie. Unequal wealth distribution is the main cause of social immobility in France. France spends over 70 billion euros on education, and it's mostly to the higher income areas, leaving the lower income areas in disparity. Hopefully something is done before the streets run red. Wealth inequality has actually been increasing over the years.
My numbers actually show otherwise. Average income is going up. The gap between middle class and upper class incomes is actually getting closer together.
France per capita national income of over 34,000 euros actually proves that France has the potential to provide a high standard of living for all of its citizens. The lack of social immobility is not due to the lack of money, but how the money is spent. Spend money on lower income areas and there will be no yellow vests.
Thank you, Ms. Ludowski. Our next guest, Bruno Le Maire, who is currently the Minister of the Economy and is working with President Macron to reduce our debt to GDP ratio, reduce unemployment, and attract skilled workers. Mr. Le Maire, what is your response to the criticism that your government favors the wealthy?
Well, I think we have already heard from 2 of Macron's critics, and I appreciate the opportunity to address them here in this forum. The European economy is not like a box of pizza. It is not a zero-sum game. We aim to phase in win-win policies. A rising tide lifts all boats.
Cliche.
I agree with Mrs. Ladowski's petition to lower taxes. Our fiscal economists have proven that lower taxes, especially through tax abatements, can actually have a significantly positive income on the economy and encourage entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a French word. When we look at the Laffer curve, we can see at certain points revenue actually increases with lower tax rates. We want to create a situation where job creators can employ their French brothers and sisters. I share Dr. Piketty's fear when he warned about French brain drain, and there's no better way to ensure that French businesses will move to greener pastures than to rapidly increase the tax.
So you're for regressive tax figures.
On the note of taxes, one of the current issues our economy is facing is tax evasion. Last year, tax evasion had costed our government over 80 billion euros. If we were to improve tax collection, we would definitely be improving the overall economy. One of the methods that we have developed would be through the use of developing an ideal bill that would allow customs and tax authorities to review user profiles and through computer algorithms can detect signs of tax evasion, fraud, smuggling, or undeclared income.
Do you consider yourself a Keynesian?
The problem with Keynesian economics is that while everyone agrees in deficit spending, they mostly forget about surplus saving, the other side of the coin. When times are good, we are supposed to raise taxes and cut expenditures if we were to truly follow the teachings of John Maynard Keynes. However, increasing taxes is unpragmatic and against the expansionary path we promised to voters. In short, it'd be political suicide. Our former President Sarkozy received a lot of brushback from the 30% exit tax he had tried to implement in his former term. Ironically, the exit tax was created to discourage French businesses from relocating outside of France. However, it has done the exact opposite. Along with the exit tax and high taxes, French citizens have been discouraged from even starting their own businesses. If entrepreneurship was encouraged, then the number of small businesses would increase and they would prosper, allowing better social mobility.
That's why we should have a global tax, maybe even a global capital gains tax.
Well, despite occasional missteps, real average national income has risen over the last 70 years in France and other EU countries. France ranks 10th in the world in GDP, unemployment is significantly lower than before, and France has yet to reach a 100% debt to GDP ratio.
Europe 2020 aims at a plan for smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth, and we have 5 measurable targets, being for unemployment, for research and innovation, for combating poverty, for education, and for climate change. We must combine our fiscal and monetary policies to have a greater coordination between our international, between Europe policies and our national French policies.
I'm glad that you brought up monetary policy. What has the ECB been doing to address the issues we've talked about here today?
I'm not sure monetary policy alone has the ability to affect social mobility on a macro level. The ECB's monetary policy aims at inflation stabilization, and with predictable and controllable growth, the European economy will flourish. Realistically, demographic trends, global fiscal policy, and technological advancements are out of the scope of our monetary policy, and there's nothing that the ECB or the Fed can really do about this.
So what can the ECB do?
One thing we can do is improve the quantity and the quality of our data. The Federal Reserve measures personal consumption expenditures. This is very specific data. This is things like how much an average American spends on yard maintenance and dry cleaning. 70% of economic output in America is driven by personal consumption, and the numbers are likely very close in Europe. It's Europe's best interest, if we want to do anything about social mobility, to know who is spending the money. This is one of the Fed's tools that I'd like to implement in Europe.
Mr. Lagarde, considering you are the first woman to head the European Central Bank, I would like to hear your thoughts about social mobility for women in Europe and particularly in France.
Empowering women is as critical now as ever, and we're making great strides, but there's a long way to still go. Gender gaps in France are extremely high. A 25-year-old man makes 25% more than his female counterpart, and a 65-year-old man makes almost 60% more than his female counterpart. Our new estimates show that closing the gender gap in employment can increase our GDP by almost 35%, and 7 to 8% of that is owed directly to productivity gains due to gender diversity. Adding more women to senior positions in banking will lead to a more stable banking sector. and adding more females to corporate boards and high positions can lead to 10% returns on investments. I hope that my role in the ECB and in the International Monetary Fund will inspire women all over the Eurozone.
Thank you, Ms. Lagarde. We are nearing the end of our Bastille Day program. Would each of you give your final thoughts and summarize on how we can move forward?
I say to introduce a progressive tax through France so that the rich and the rest can grow together. Make it universal so that all Eurozone countries have an equal playing field. This should help keep French entrepreneurs from leaving.
Invest more in education and training. Give subsidies to keep the blue-collar costs down.
Improve tax collection. If all the money France was owed was actually collected, there would be so much more we could do.
Creatively combine fiscal policy at the national level and monetary policy at the supranational level, and pursue macroeconomic stability with inclusive growth and a goal to support everyone.
This is the end of our Bastille Day program. Thank you for tuning in.
All cities in all countries in the Eurozone, it is going to change city to city, but countries having knowledge on the cost of living of different areas in Europe can better adjust their wages to where a person is living.
Another question. I think I want to follow up on this. We're talking about the differences, say, perhaps from a country like France to a Central European country. How about within France itself, between your urban and your rural areas? How is the cost of living adjustment or cost of living and social welfare programs, how do they affect inequality in the rural versus the urban area?
So the cost of living in urban areas is higher than in rural areas, with big cities like Paris and Nice and cities that are often visited by tourists too. The cost of living is going to be higher because they have higher prices for various things, and people that work there are going to be paid higher. So if someone is employed in a big city like Paris, they're going to be paid higher than they would maybe doing the same job, which the jobs may not compare from rural to urban, but if they were doing the same job in rural France, they would not be paid the same. So I think starting out in a bigger city, being employed in a bigger city at a younger age, can lead you to do better off, and you will be higher off in like socioeconomic classes because you're paid more from the get-go. So I think that's an advantage to people living in a city, and then people in rural areas, like the people that started protesting green tax. They lived in rural areas, and their cost of living was lower, so they were paid lower, and they couldn't, compete, or they weren't able to pay for the diesel and petrol that they needed to, which is why they started protesting the green tax. So that, I think, directly relates with income inequality and how cost of living does affect social mobility.
And I'd also like to point out how in the cities there are definitely far more job opportunities around the area compared to rural areas. There's a lot of competition to attract the most qualified people to have access to those jobs and make profit off of those, which in return make profit off of the businesses. So businesses are always looking for the most qualified people. And most of them definitely come in from rural areas from all different walks of life to come to the city to find a good job to sustain for their families.
I think it also applies for social welfare programs. In the rural areas where the cost of living is generally low, they're not going to be receiving the same amount of social welfare as someone in the city. Of course, there is some sort of idea of universal social welfare, but it would still generally be different when the cost of living is also different.